I have been an academic coordinator at the Galactic Student Exchange Institute for 11 years. I have processed students from 39 different species. I have handled cultural misunderstandings, dietary emergencies, and one unfortunate incident involving a Pelori student who refused to acknowledge that gravity applied to them. I am good at my job. I am patient. I am calm. I am, by all professional standards, unshakable. Then they sent me the Australian. Let me start from the beginning. Humanity had recently passed the threshold, which is the minimum civilizational benchmark required to participate in the exchange program. 42 species were already enrolled. Humans became species number 43. Our preliminary assessment of Earth classified it as a Category 6 world, meaning moderate, decent gravity, breathable atmosphere, liquid water on the surface. Nothing remarkable. The committee approved their application without much discussion, and I was assigned to receive the first human exchange student at Station Orith 7. His name was Jake Maddox, 22 years old. From a place called Dubbo, in a region called New South Wales, on the continent of Australia. I read his file twice before his shuttle arrived. Academic performance was average. Physical health was listed as excellent. Under the section marked Special Considerations, someone had written, None noted. I remember thinking how refreshingly simple this would be. The shuttle doors opened and Jake stepped out, wearing short pants that stopped above his knees, flat rubber footwear held on by a single strap between his toes, and a thin sleeveless shirt that looked like it had been washed several hundred times. He had white paste smeared across his nose. He carried one bag over his shoulder. He looked around the gleaming corridors of Station Orith 7, a structure that had taken 4 species and 60 years to construct, and he said, "Yeah, nah, this is all right." That was my first warning. I did not recognize it at the time. I gave him the standard orientation. I showed him the living quarters, the dining hall, the medical bay, and the emergency shelters. I explained our atmospheric monitoring systems, our radiation shielding, and our pressure loss protocols in careful detail. Jake nodded through all of it with a pleasant expression. I felt satisfied. Then he asked me if there was anywhere on the station he could get something called a meat pie, and I realized he had not absorbed a single word I had said. He simply was not concerned about any of it. I introduced him to the other exchange students. There was Thesic, a delicate insectoid being who communicated through soft bioluminescent pulses across her exoskeleton. There was Gorvan, a massive four-armed creature from a frozen world who, despite his intimidating size, was the most anxious and gentle soul on the station. And there was Pelori, a crystalline intelligence who considered having a physical body to be a mild personal inconvenience. Jake greeted each of them with the same word. "G'day." He shook the Gorvan's enormous clawed hand without flinching. He looked at the Thesic's glowing patterns and asked if it was more like a mood ring or more like a lava lamp. He told the Pelori that its crystal body looked pretty flash. None of them knew what any of this meant. Neither did I, but all of them liked him immediately. That was the strange thing about Jake. You could not help it. The first real incident happened during a supervised visit to the xenobiology laboratory. The lab houses specimens from across the galaxy, all sealed behind layered containment fields. During our tour, a power fluctuation caused a brief failure in one containment unit, and a Scythian fang crawler escaped onto the lab floor. This is a Category 4 predatory organism. Armored body, venomous mandibles, approximately the size of a large domestic animal. Standard protocol requires immediate evacuation of the sector and a 12-minute wait for the containment response team. The Thesic fainted. Her bioluminescence went completely dark. The Gorvan froze where he stood, all 4 arms locked rigid. The Pelori began calculating survival probabilities out loud and announced that the numbers were unfavorable. I triggered the emergency alarm and ordered everyone to move toward the exit. Jake did not move toward the exit. Jake looked at the creature, which was hissing and snapping its mandibles on the floor between us and the door, and he said, "Oh yeah, we've got something like that back home. Huntsman on steroids, this one." Then he took off one of his rubber footwear pieces and walked toward it. I shouted at him to stop. He did not stop. With a calm, practiced motion, he scooped the creature against the wall and pinned it there, with one hand on its armored back. It thrashed. Jake held firm. He looked back at me and asked, very casually, if I had a box or a bucket he could put it in. The containment team arrived 4 minutes later to find Jake still holding the creature against the bulkhead, humming a tune to himself. They stared at him. He stared at them. He said, "You blokes want to take this, or should I just walk it back to its cage?" I filed my first incident report that evening. I also filed for additional hazard insurance. The human had subdued a Category 4 predator with a rubber sandal. I began to suspect that my understanding of Earth had significant gaps. Those gaps became canyons during xenogeography class. The course includes an environmental simulation module where students experience the conditions of each other's homeworlds. Each student takes a turn. The Thesic's homeworld simulation was lovely. Gentle humidity, soft light, mild temperatures. Everyone enjoyed it. The Gorvon's was harsh. Extreme cold, darkness, biting wind. Everyone endured it politely in thermal suits. Then it was Jake's turn. The system loaded the environmental profile for his listed home region. Outback, New South Wales. Summer. The temperature climbed to 47 degrees. The ultraviolet radiation index spiked to levels the system flagged as potentially dangerous to unshielded organic life. The air became so dry that the humidity reader displayed a number I had never seen before. Simulated dust whipped across the chamber. The ambient sound system added a rhythmic buzzing noise and a strange laughing call that the database identified as a bird called a kookaburra. Every other student left the chamber within 90 seconds. The Thesic's exoskeleton began showing stress fractures from the heat. The Pelori declared the environment openly hostile to organized matter. The Gorvon refused to set foot inside. Jake walked in wearing the same singlet and shorts he always wore. He stood in the center of the simulation, squinted at the artificial sun and said, "Bit mild for February. Honestly, I checked the data 3 times. It was not malfunctioning. This was simply what part of Australia was like." That night, I accessed Earth's complete fauna database and began reading about the continent of Australia specifically. What I found there changed me as a person. The most venomous snake on the planet. The most venomous jellyfish. The most venomous octopus. Spiders that could pierce through thick material. Saltwater crocodiles that grow to 6 meters and hunt everything. A flightless bird called a cassowary that has been documented defeating armed adult humans. And the Australians simply live there. They go outside. They go to the beach. They have barbecues. I formally petitioned the Galactic Council to reclassify Earth from Category 6 to Category 12, which is the designation for a death world. The petition was denied. I appealed. It was denied again. I am still appealing. The dining situation was another matter entirely. The station's meal system is precisely calibrated for every species. Jake took one look at his prescribed nutrient paste and asked if there was a kitchen he could use. Within 2 days, he had acquired several items from the cargo supply chain, including a dark brown substance he called Vegemite. I had it analyzed. The lab classified it as a concentrated bacterial byproduct with sodium levels incompatible with 31 of our 42 registered species. Jake ate it on toast every morning and called it breakfast. He offered some to the Thesic as a gesture of friendship. The Thesic, whose species partially processes emotions through taste, took one tiny sample. Her bioluminescent display erupted in a pattern the translator rendered as, "Why would you do this to me?" Jake laughed until he could barely breathe. The Thesic, despite her initial shock, began glowing in the color pattern associated with deep affection. She could not explain why. Neither could I. I confiscated the Vegemite. Jake produced a second jar. I confiscated that one too. A third appeared. I do not know where he was keeping them. I eventually stopped trying. He also brought something called a football. Not a sphere, an oblong leather object. He explained the rules of a game called AFL, and I listened with slowly building disbelief. It involved full-body contact, leaping onto other participants, and launching the ball at high speeds. All with minimal protective equipment. Jake described it as a bit of fun for the weekend. I banned it immediately. He shrugged and taught the Gorvon cricket instead. The Gorvon, with 4 arms and exceptional coordination, became remarkably good within days. I would find them in the cargo bay at all hours, Jake bowling the ball and the Gorvon batting it into the far wall with devastating precision. Jake called him a natural leggy, and then shortened his name to Baza, which the Gorvon accepted with visible pride. Here is what surprised me. The Gorvon had arrived on Station Orith 7, unable to make eye contact with other species. He spoke in whispers. He sat alone in the dining hall. After 4 weeks with Jake, Baza was standing tall, greeting people with a gesture Jake called finger guns, and organizing recreational matches that half the station attended. Jake had not tried to fix him. He had simply treated him like a friend from the very first moment, and never stopped. Then came the day. Everything nearly fell apart. A cascading power failure in the station's outer ring caused a micro-breach in an unpopulated storage corridor. Atmosphere began venting into space. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but the breach was at a critical junction. If the seal failed completely, life support to the entire residential ring would be cut. Repair drones were offline due to the power failure. A manual repair was needed. Someone had to carry a sealant kit across an unpressurized freezing corridor to reach the breach point. The security team began suiting up. Full preparation would take 20 minutes. We had maybe 12 before the junction failed. Jake appeared in the corridor wearing a standard emergency vacuum suit pulled off the wall. It was rated for 8 minutes of exposure. The crossing was estimated at 6 minutes. That left a 2-minute margin. Our protocols require 4. I told him he could not do this. He looked at me and said, "Mate, I once drove 45 minutes on a flat tire through the middle of nowhere to reach a petrol station before dark. This is 6 minutes. She'll be right." He entered the corridor before I could physically stop him. Over the communication channel, I could hear him humming a tune. Something about a land down under. He reached the breach in 5 minutes. He applied the sealant patch and held it in place with his gloved hands while the emergency foam expanded and hardened. In near vacuum, in a suit not rated for extended exposure. He narrated the entire process over comms like he was fixing a fence on a farm. Calm, steady, almost bored. He walked back. The suit's warning systems were screaming. When he stepped through the bulkhead and pulled off his helmet, his nose was bleeding slightly from the pressure changes. He wiped it with the back of his hand and looked at me. "So, where's that dining hall?" he said. "I'm absolutely starving." The Gorvan wept. In his culture, weeping is reserved for sacred moments. The Thessic glowed, in a color no one on the station had ever seen from her species before. The translator could only offer one word for it: awe. Even the Pelori spoke. It looked at Jake with its ancient crystalline eyes and said, "You are acceptable." From a Pelori, that is practically a marriage proposal. I sat down to write my end-of-semester evaluation that night. I had been asked a simple question: are humans suitable for the exchange program? I stared at my screen for a very long time. I thought about the containment breach and the rubber sandal. I thought about the Vegemite incident and the Thessic's outrage. I thought about 47-degree heat and a human standing in it calling it mild. I thought about Baza learning cricket and finding his confidence. I thought about a man walking into a freezing corridor with a 2-minute margin and humming a song about his home. I wrote my recommendation. Humans are approved for continued participation in the Galactic Exchange Program. They are resilient, socially bonding, irrationally brave, and somehow capable of making everyone around them better simply by refusing to take the universe too seriously. One is more than enough. One is enough. One is more than enough. I have read that Canada produces humans who are polite and quiet. Send us one of those next time, please. I submitted the report and poured myself a drink. Through the wall, I could hear Jake in the common room teaching Baza a song. The translator caught fragments. Something about a jolly swagman and a billabong. I searched the galactic database. Neither word existed in any known language beyond Earth. I finished my drink. I filed for a vacation. And despite everything, despite the incident reports and the confiscated Vegemite and the near-catastrophic corridor walk, I could not stop smiling. They did not send me a Canadian the following semester. They sent me another Australian. God help me.